And then this silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spying equipment was...
I'm declaring this state of emergency because you need to know what's happening.
Beware that your life is not valued.
We have to start teaching the necessity of individual responsibility.
Joe Biden talks about the Chinese spy balloon that wasn't a spy balloon, according to his own administration. Tim Scott is in for president. North Carolina declares a state of emergency. And black people beware. The NAACP says don't go to Florida. All this and more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in on today. It is Tuesday, May 23rd, the year of our Lord 2023. The technical problems. I'm not going to complain about it, but you're seeing it right now. It just sucks. Yesterday, our entire system took a dump. That's why we weren't here yesterday. But we got a lot to talk to today. We'll catch up on all the things that happened over the weekend. And some interesting things happened yesterday. North Carolina is in a state of emergency. Everyone panic. If you live in North Carolina, you need to panic now. I'll get to that in just a quick second because I do want to get to this first. Just really quick right off the bat here, and we won't spend a ton of time on this. Joe Biden was at the G7 in Japan last week, over the weekend-ish, talking about the Chinese spy balloon and his relationship with China. And I wanted to play this quick clip so that you could see what the president and the administration and the White House is now going to try to pivot whenever the Chinese spy balloon is brought up. He says some pretty interesting things, and I'll predict, and by predict, I mean tell you exactly what's going to happen once Joe Biden is asked about this question several months down the road. Watch what he says about the Chinese spy balloon, and then we will discuss on the other side. And by watch, I mean hopefully this thing is choppy and just being a temperamental pain in the butt. So check it out. Watch this.
China. Thank you.
Well, number one, you're right. We should have an open hotline. At the Bali conference, that's what the President Xi and I agreed we were going to do and meet on. And then this silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spying equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down, and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that begin to thaw very shortly. But in the meantime, what's happened is, I think it's fair to say, for those of you who have dealt with the Japanese government and reported from here for a long time, the situation...
That's basically it. So he's been asked, like, hey, how's your relationship with Xi? And Joe Biden says, well, it was great, but then they flew a spy balloon and it got shot down. Here's how they're going to frame this in the future. It is dumb. It is stupid. However, I guarantee you this is going to happen. In 6 months or so, because remember, the Chinese spy balloon is still pretty recent, like 2-ish months ago, 3-ish months ago. In 6 months, when everyone has kind of forgotten about the whole thing, if it's brought up by any sort of reporter anywhere that is able to ask him a question, because that's not a thing that reporters get to do all that often, he's going to say, well, yes, it was a Chinese spy balloon, and the past excuse for not shooting it down earlier was, well, we didn't want it to hit any buildings in Montana where there are almost 0 buildings. I will almost guarantee, with the way that he's speaking right here, is going to say at some point, well, we tried to shoot it down sooner, but Republicans didn't allow us to do so. At the end of the day, bottom line, I can guarantee you that's going to happen. What is this? May 23rd. I want to bookmark this so that when that does happen, I can revert back to this and say, I told you so. They let the stupid thing fly across the entire continental U.S. with 3 bus loads of spy equipment on it, shot it down over the ocean, weren't really able to retrieve anything, but I guarantee you they're going to say, well, the reason we had to let this thing fly over a lot of U.S. land and a lot of U.S. military bases and spy is because Republicans weren't quick to act. But this is also we don't need to get into that. Joe Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy decision he's ever made. That's not hyperbole, and it's also not really partisan. That's just true. Remember, Joe Biden was the only guy in the room who did not want to go get Osama bin Laden. But the slow to react is a huge thing for him. I want to get to this because I want to get to, well, there's a lot going on here. I promise we'll get to the North Carolina. There was somebody in the comments section. Where is it? I lost it. It's floating by too fast. It said they were in North Carolina. Here we go. Kimberly says, I'm in North Carolina. We've not heard anything. Kimberly, you need to panic. Panic should be ensuing in North Carolina as there is a state of emergency. Just FYI, the state of emergency is total BS. That's probably why you haven't heard of it. But we'll talk about that in just a second. Because I want to get to this. This is so bad that it's funny. Did you hear this over the weekend? I wish, again, the system didn't take a dump yesterday because we could have talked about it yesterday. But over the weekend, the NAACP, a formerly good organization along with the ACLU, actually would promote things that a lot of people, the majority of people, would like to see happen. The now terribly partisan isn't even the right word, just woke, insane asylum that is the NAACP issued a travel ban. Now, you're probably asking, wait a minute, do nonprofits issue travel bans? No, that's not a thing. The travel advisories usually come from the State Department. But the NAACP decided to issue a travel advisory to Black people, and this is where it's going to get interesting, people of color and the LGBTQ2 plus 369 community to not go to the state of Florida. I want you to watch this video. This is the president, spokesperson, whatever. I don't know what this guy's name is. He is a hack, and therefore I will not learn his name. I don't care enough. Anyways, this is the dude talking on behalf of the NAACP about why going to Florida is just so terrible for Black people. And then we'll get to this MSNBC clip that I think is fascinating. Watch this and we'll discuss on the other side. Check it out.
Well, the governor has perfected the art of doing stunts to gain campaign contributions. Unfortunately, this will impact people's lives. We should not use race or othering as a tool to weaponize against people. And unfortunately, for a large percentage of the Floridians, that's what he has done. Therefore, we are advising African Americans and others that if you travel to Florida, beware that your life is not valued, that we have a political landscape that could cause harm as we prepare for the 2024 elections to right-size the political landscape in the state of Florida.
So I often don't know how to react to this sort of stuff because I'm sure there's a lot of people going, this is crazy and say, this is funny. Like, this is straight up funny. This guy, okay, think about what has to go through this guy's head. Some people commented saying, let's see, Jody said, that guy's the head of the NAACP. What an idiotic moron. Yeah, funny. Okay, think about what has to go through this guy's head. He has to, one, think that for some reason, Florida, and by that he's saying Ron DeSantis specifically, is somehow targeting Black people and endangering their safety, which is insane. But I guess I'll give him a little bit of grace. If you watch channels like MSNBC or CNN or any of the network news talking about just how the Don't Say Gay bill, which is not actually a thing, and all of the cable news nonsense that you see coming out of the state of Florida, I guess in theory, I could see how he might think that. But then if you look at actual statistics, and if you look, interestingly enough, Florida has a higher population of black people than the overall representation of the United States living there. So are all of them in danger, or is it just the black people traveling there? Okay, but then to sit there with a straight face and say, if you are black and go to Florida, your life is not valued. All right, dude. Like, I would love to see you point to any reason as to why that would actually be true. Look, and the thing, too, is at the end of the day, these people are in the business of gaining attention. The people at the NAACP, the people at the ACLU, they're now in the business of garnering attention. So, in reality, this doofus knows what he's saying is nonsense. He knows. He has to know. And if he doesn't know, he got some bigger problems over there at the NAACP. But look, he knows. He's just trying to get attention, to try and raise awareness for the NAACP. And that's why he's doing that. Now, I want to get to this one clip really quick before we talk about the emergency in North Carolina, because I'm seeing several of you watching that North Carolina want to talk about it. We will. Give me a second. Let me get through this really quick. But I thought this was funny. The NAACP says don't go to Florida. This is what they played on MSNBC. And this is where I guess personally, would take some exception to how this is being categorized in terms of apparently now nonprofits can issue travel advisories. Watch this and we'll discuss on the other side.
The NAACP is issuing a travel advisory for the state of Florida. The civil rights organization said in a statement that Florida is openly hostile to African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals, and said the decision comes in response to Ron DeSantis' attempts to erase Black history. They also listed specific.
We're not going to go on entirely about that because that's ridiculous. There's a couple more seconds of this clip, but I don't want to. That's dumb. They're trying to erase Black history. Okay, that's disproven so many times. It is incredible that people think they can still get away with saying that. And also, knowing that it's entirely false, say it with a straight face. Here's where I take some exception to this. The statement from the NAACP says Florida is openly hostile to African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals, which therefore groups all of those people together into one pot, including the crazy trans activists that are saying that, well, kids as young as 3 years old know that they can be a different gender, and we have to mutilate their bodies surgically in order to have them express the gender that they so desire at 3 years old. So what you're doing, effectively, MSNBC, is grouping Black people, people of color, this guy, and crazy, insane trans people all into one pot. And I, for one, do not want to be in that pot. Please remove me out of that situation. I'm going to be in Florida, in July? So, geez, a month and a half? I will be wary, but I guarantee you nothing bad's going to happen to me there. In a lot of ways, considering the reasons why I'm going to Florida, I will be celebrated. So, think with that what you will, Mr. NAACP people. All right, now here to this moment that everybody, there's like 5 or 6 people in the comment section across all the different platforms that live in North Carolina that are like, what is going on in North Carolina? Everyone in North Carolina needs to panic. This is an emergency and it needs to be dealt with. Roy Cooper, the governor, the Democrat governor of North Carolina, came out yesterday and issued a state of emergency. And I saw this come across the headlines and go, oh my gosh, what is happening in North Carolina? Is there a environmental disaster? Is there a hurricane? Is there an earthquake? Is there a tornado? What's happening there? Is there some sort of, military coup on the government? What is happening to elicit a state of emergency in which everyone should panic? Nothing, apparently. There's some legislation going through that Roy Cooper does not like regarding schools. Parents across the country, and specifically in North Carolina, would like to see the state not put such a heavy emphasis on catering to the teachers' unions and instead, possibly, maybe, focus on the kids, as that is the entirety of the goal of education. However, if you're someone like Roy Cooper, someone deviating away from government schools and promoting things like school choice or charter schools, that is completely unacceptable, and that is why he has issued a state of emergency. And you may think, did he actually say state of emergency? Because that seems a little bit over the top, a little bit drastic. Yes, he did. Watch this short clip. This is taken from like a 5-minute video, but this is the governor of the state declaring a state of emergency because of legislation he doesn't like. We'll react to some of the fallout that's going to come from this, but this is a step in a weird direction. Anyways, watch this very short clip and we'll discuss on the other side.
Hi, everybody. It's time to declare a state of emergency for public education in North Carolina. There's no executive order like with a hurricane or the pandemic, but it's no less important. It's clear that the Republican legislature is aiming to choke the life out of public education. I'm declaring this state of emergency because you need to know what's happening. If you care about public schools in North Carolina, it's time to take immediate action and tell them to stop the damage that will set back our schools for a generation.
And that's it. That is the emergency that everyone in North Carolina needs to be aware of. Now, here's a couple things. Now, first of all, we can talk about the issue itself. I think it's pretty self-evident and pretty well argued that school choice is a better system, especially for lower income families. If you're not familiar with school choice, it is right now, depending on your zip code, the government sends you to government school, which in most places around the country, the government school system is failing kids and their families. Now, part of the ways that the government school system is failing is because there's no competition. If you live in that area, if you live in that zip code or school district, you are automatically sent to one school or the other. Now, what school choice seeks to do is basically say that passing, some sort of accreditation. I don't know what the accreditation process is like in North Carolina, but here in California, you have to pass an accreditation process, and then you can accept vouchers from kids to come to your school. Effectively, what you're doing is you're creating a free market for education in which parents who pay for school by their tax dollars get a voucher, and then that kid goes to this school, and therefore this school can succeed or not based on how many kids decide to go there, which competition drives everything up in terms of quality. That's the argument for school choice. It makes 100% sense. However, if you're in bed with the teachers' unions and want to promote government schools, you hate school choice, which is the situation going on in North Carolina. Roy Cooper, the Democrat governor of North Carolina, is clearly backed by the teachers' unions, which are advocates for the teachers, not for the students, which again is the only goal of education. And therefore, because legislation is going to get through, and because Republicans in the legislature of North Carolina have veto override ability, he's calling for a state of emergency to bring attention to the fact that parents and legislators want better schools for their kids. Now, he goes on to this 5-minute video talking about, here's what it's doing, and this is going to be destructive. But all of it, I would say, is a complete partisan lunacy, and he's just trying to gain attention. Now, here's the bigger problem, I think, with this. how low are we going to set the bar for states of emergency and executive power? Now, you heard in that clip right there that this is not the same. He's not going to be able to wield the same power as a hurricane or a tornado or some sort of natural disaster. Having said that, it's still using the same terminology and the same verbiage for the public. And what he's doing effectively is campaigning through the official office that he has by calling it a state of emergency. Here's the issue. When you actually have state of emergencies, one, if you actually have a state of emergency, you lessen the amount of people that pay attention, because several people, especially commenting in here, I've been able to see a couple of the comments of people who live in North Carolina just rolling their eyes. Interesting comments from people, again, who actually live in North Carolina. People who live in North Carolina rolling their eyes and not paying attention to an actual emergency. That's where I see a problem with this too. The other issue would be the FEC. Well, technically speaking, it would be North Carolina Elections Committee. The FEC is the Federal Elections Commission. Every state has one. And what it is the regulatory agency that allows certain things or disallows certain things, basically has standards and guidelines for what's campaigning and what's official government use. In every single state, in all federal elections, in all of those, you cannot, legally speaking, give a political speech or make a political claim from an official government position. You can advocate for policy and legislation and ideas, but you can't promote yourself or your name and likeness for elections down the road. Does that make sense? In effect, I would be super curious if the North Carolina Regulatory Committee that manages elections sees this as a breach in which the governor used a state of emergency to tell people about what he thinks should happen from a political standpoint. The lines get a little bit blurry with this sort of stuff, and a lot of people don't get probably the most recent example. Remember the video, the speech that Joe Biden gave at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, of where there's pictures of him with a big red background, screaming. Just the optics were terrible on that. He effectively gave an entirely political speech from a presidential podium, which is not okay, not allowed. But unfortunately, nothing happened because a lot of people play fast and loose with election laws. And a lot of times nothing ever does happen with this. Now, take it on to another situation that has been very much in the news. Elections Commission's guidelines is what President Trump is being accused of in Manhattan. We talked about this at length, and we don't need to go over it again. But effectively, the presidential campaign of Donald Trump in 2016 filed some paperwork incorrectly, and therefore is being prosecuted and led to the first arrest of a former U.S. president in this nation's history. You want to talk partisan BS? This should give you it right on a silver platter. Effectively speaking, I think the governor of North Carolina is violating all kinds of campaign laws by issuing a state of emergency for political purposes, but I don't think it'll ever get prosecuted because he is a Democrat, and because we don't prosecute Democrats for this sort of thing. We only prosecute former Republican presidents who filed some paperwork possibly incorrectly. That's still alleged, by the way. So there you go, North Carolina. Your state of emergency is what it is. Shoot. Let's move to South Carolina. I thought this was a funny headline. Finally, someone that BLM can support. Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, announced his candidacy for presidency yesterday to an audience that is much bigger than I guess I thought. A lot of people have written him off kind of immediately, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments in the comment section saying, no, Trump 2024. Fine, I'm going to let the election system play off as it goes. I would probably say that I like Tim Scott the most. He seems... I've never met Tim in person. Actually, I don't know if I have. I've never had a conversation with Tim Scott. But everybody I know that has says that he is a super down-to-earth guy, both on the Senate floor and off of it. The guy is a sharp dude. Whether or not you like Trump or DeSantis, interestingly enough, interesting fun fact here, Tim Scott has the biggest quote-unquote war chest when it comes to campaign finance than any of the candidates, or any candidate I think ever has gone into a presidential election for. So that's something to watch out for. Regardless of whether or not he wins, I am a huge Tim Scott fan. I'm going to play you a clip from this. And even if you're like 100% on the Trump train or 100% on the DeSantis train, because those are the only two in the conversation at the moment, even if you are one of those people who thinks that those two candidates are far and away the best ones, you can't not like Tim Scott. The dude is has some great ideas, and he's super well spoken about them. I want you to watch this clip. Again, even if you agree wholeheartedly with Trump 2024, you're going to agree with what Tim Scott has to say. Check this out.
Today's kids are growing up immersed in a culture where everyone's a victim. We have to start teaching the necessity of individual responsibility. If you are able-bodied, you work. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. Can I get an amen? I'm telling you the truth. I'm Tim Scott, and I approve this message.
So yeah, Tim Scott is running. He is in. Now, politically speaking, I don't know what his goal is. And you never do know, because in a lot of ways, like, for example, Nikki Haley, also from South Carolina, I think a lot of people recognize what her path to federal power is. And a lot of people think it's the vice presidency. And she makes a lot of sense. She's a very, very smart, sharp, intelligent woman. Person. It doesn't matter that she's a woman, but she's she's intelligent, smart, and can get a lot of things done. I think most people think that her angle is towards the vice presidency, even though she's running for president. I don't know what Tim's angle is. I don't know if he actually wants to win and become the president, or if he wants to, because you're into the horse trading world if you're in the presidential race. If he's not doing well, but has a handful of supporters and can throw that support behind somebody, Tim, like anybody, will look at the polls and say, well, I've actually always wanted to be the Secretary of State, and trade his people, his group, his constituent, his people that are voting for Tim Scott for the endorsement of either a Trump or a DeSantis. Again, I who knows, but I can see that possibly being his angle, and him maybe not necessarily wanting to be there. Now, that can lead to various things. Tim Scott's only 57, I think, which is incredibly young. But a lot of people, let's see, Kimberly says, I can see Tim as a VP. Ryan said that too somewhere. Here we go. Yeah. Ryan says Trump/Scott. A lot of people, yeah, outpouring. Wow. A lot of people outpouring of love for Tim Scott here on this particular stream. But yeah, I don't know what his angle is. Maybe he's vying for the vice presidential seat. Maybe he's a Secretary of State kind of guy. Maybe he wants to get appointed to the cabinet of the future president. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean, look, if Donald Trump ends up being the nominee and Tim Scott either is the vice presidential candidate or the Secretary of State, Trump's only got one term. That puts Tim Scott at 60 to 61 years old as an either vice president or Secretary of State. That's a pretty viable position to be in 2028 to run for president. So again, I don't know what his actual goal here is. He seems kind of like a Mayor Pete type of person in this particular instance, except for the fact that he's a senator who has won now 3 elections, I think. If you don't know, Tim Scott was appointed in 2013 by Nikki Haley for the Senate, won the special election 2014, won re-election in 2016, won re-election again in 2022. So he's been elected 3 different times after being appointed to the Senate. All that's to say is he is not Pete Buttigieg in that respect, the mayor of a small town in Indiana. But the bottom line is, I don't know if he's actually looking to win this cycle or if he's looking to gain support in order to throw it behind somebody else and to endorse them and maybe get a higher office in the cabinet and maybe then go on to run for president. End of the day, bottom line here is I'm a big Tim Scott fan. Love the cut of his jib, and he is promising for the American future in general, whether or not it's this cycle or the next. Wow, we didn't even get to Chicago. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. Of all places in the country, there are people in Chicago saying, build the wall. Tell me how that works. But you know what? That'll do it for us today. Hey, appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. Weren't on yesterday, and the system seems to be running a little bit better. Yesterday, we weren't on yesterday because the entire system just took a dump on us at about 5 to 10 minutes before the show. The entire system reset, and we were locked out for like several hours in the house. Just all right. But yeah, we will see you tomorrow. So appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media accounts. I will play this video. If you follow me on Instagram, there was a conversation that Charlie Kirk and Alex Clark had about the use of bathrooms in private businesses while you're out in public. Go to my Instagram, watch that, and then what I mean to say is I don't know that there has been any more heated debate in the comments section of this seemingly innocuous topic of conversation. The people are going wild. So go find me on Instagram, watch that reel, and let me know where you stand on that. I will play that reel on tomorrow's show. But again, it's me, Charlie Kirk, and Alex Clark talking about how, if ever, to use public bathrooms in private businesses. I don't know, way more interesting than I would have thought, but you can go on my Instagram and get involved or join the conversation there. That'll do it for us today. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We will see you tomorrow, same time, same place. God bless America.